There's a tornado. Looks like it's going to Frog Mountain.
On March 27, 1994, 29 tornadoes swept across the American Southeast, killing 42 people and injuring more than 320 people. The deadliest moment came at 11:39 in the morning. An F4 tornado struck Goshen United Methodist Church in Piedmont, Alabama during Palm Sunday worship services, and 20 congregants died, including the pastor's 4-year-old daughter. The outbreak exposed critical failures in tornado warning systems. What makes the 1994 Palm Sunday tornado outbreak historically significant was not its meteorological intensity. This was not a super outbreak, and it did not produce the most violent tornadoes ever recorded. What set this event apart was something far more troubling. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning 12 minutes before the church was destroyed, and the congregation never knew it existed. The disaster did not expose a failure in detection. It exposed a failure in communication, what emergency managers call the last mile problem. The changes it forced would reshape how America delivers severe weather warnings for the next 3 decades. To understand what happened on Palm Sunday, 1994, we need to start with what meteorologists were seeing in the days before the outbreak, because this event presented an unusual forecasting challenge. Most major tornado outbreaks carry clear signatures in the atmospheric data. Forecasters typically see a well-defined surface, low pressure system, a prominent shortwave trough in the upper atmosphere, and the polar jet stream positioned to interact with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. These classical synoptic indicators tell forecasters that conditions are ripe for widespread, severe weather. The 1994 Palm Sunday outbreak had none of these features. Meteorologists later described it as not synoptically evident, with the polar jet positioned well north of the affected area, no prominent shortwave trough, and no well-defined surface low. By textbook standards, this did not look like a major tornado outbreak, but the atmosphere does not always follow textbooks. What forecasters did see were concerning instability parameters. CAPE values measure the potential energy available for thunderstorm development, and they reached between 2,348 and 2,665 joules per kilogram across Mississippi and Alabama. Storm relative helicity, which indicates the potential for rotating storms and mesocyclone development, measured between 360 and 443 meters squared per second squared. These numbers pointed toward serious supercell and tornado potential, even without the classical synoptic setup. The Storm Prediction Center began tracking this threat 2 days before Palm Sunday. Their Day 2 outlook at 2 a.m. on March 26th, a Saturday, mentioned the possibility of isolated supercells, and by noon they had upgraded the outlook to say some supercell tornadoes were possible. On the morning of Palm Sunday itself, the Day 1 outlook issued at 1 a.m. placed Alabama under a moderate risk for severe weather. Tornado Watch number 41 was issued at 9:18 a.m., followed by a public severe weather outlook at 10 a.m. warning that tornadoes could be particularly intense. By noon Eastern Time, Tornado Watch number 42 was issued for northern Georgia. This watch carried the designation, Particularly Dangerous Situation, the highest level of Tornado Watch the Weather Service issues. The risk was upgraded to high risk at 1:30 p.m. The forecasters saw this coming. The watches went out on time. The outlooks were appropriately upgraded as the threat materialized. This was not a failure of meteorological prediction. But there was a problem at the local level. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Disaster Survey Team later documented that the Atlanta Weather Office did not issue any statements before the event for severe thunderstorms or tornadoes, even after the Storm Prediction Center substantially raised the level of risk for northern Georgia. Their zone forecast described conditions as windy with scattered showers, even though the outlook was already a moderate risk. The office focused primarily on the threat of flash flooding rather than on tornadoes. This disconnect between national and local messaging would prove costly. But the far more consequential problem was not in the forecasts or the watches. It was in what happened after the warnings went out. March 27th, 1994 was a Sunday morning in the Bible Belt, and churches were full. Families had gathered for Palm Sunday services, the beginning of Holy Week leading to Easter. At Goshen United Methodist Church in Cherokee County, Alabama, approximately 150 people had gathered for worship. The church sat in a rural area near Piedmont, a small town of a few thousand people in the northeastern corner of the state. The service began with the children's choir walking down the aisle, waving palm fronds in the traditional Palm Sunday procession. Pastor Kelly Clem led the congregation through worship, and her 4-year-old daughter Hannah and 2-year-old daughter Sarah were among the children present. Severe weather was already developing across the region. Activity began at 9 a.m., and the first violent tornado of the day touched down near Ragland, Alabama at 10:55 a.m. The first fatality came at 11:05 a.m. when a woman died at a boat ramp on Neely Henry Lake. At 11:27 a.m., 12 minutes before the tornado would strike Goshen United Methodist Church, the National Weather Service office in Birmingham issued a tornado warning for Cherokee County. This is where everything went wrong. The warning existed. It went out with what, by 1994 standards, was excellent lead time. 12 minutes may not sound like much, but it was enough time for the congregation to move to safety. For comparison, modern tornado warnings average 13 minutes of lead time, just 1 minute more than what Goshen received. And here's what makes this even more painful. Because NOAA investigators later discovered that an interior hallway in the church building remained completely intact after the tornado passed. Had the congregation received the warning and sheltered in that hallway, all 150 people could have survived. A place of safety existed inside that building. They just did not know they needed to use it. But the congregation never received the warning. No NOAA weather radio sat inside the church, and no NOAA weather radio transmitter even covered the Piedmont area. Budget cuts in the 1970s had curtailed the expansion of the weather radio network, leaving rural areas like Cherokee County with no coverage while urban areas were served. No outdoor tornado sirens existed in that part of Cherokee County. The congregation was not monitoring television or radio because they were in church on Palm Sunday morning, focused on worship. More than 80 phone calls to 911 had reported the tornado as it moved through St. Clair County before reaching Goshen. 80 calls. The warning had gone out. People knew the tornado was coming, but no mechanism existed to get that information to a church full of people who had no idea what was bearing down on them. At 11:32 a.m., 7 minutes before hitting Goshen, an F3 tornado destroyed Antioch Baptist Church in Grove Oak, just a few miles away. No one died there. 2 other churches in the area were also destroyed during services that morning, with no fatalities. At 11:39 a.m., the tornado struck Goshen United Methodist Church. A Piedmont police officer spotted the tornado just before impact and radioed headquarters, and this transmission established the exact time of 11:39 a.m. He had no way to warn the congregation. The tornado carried winds estimated between 207 and 260 miles per hour, later rated F4 on the Fujita scale, developed by Ted Fujita in the 1970s. The church building was destroyed, 20 people died, and more than 90 people were injured. The 20 people who lost their lives at Goshen United Methodist Church that morning ranged from toddlers to the elderly. Their names were Edward Earl Abbott, Jonathan Andrews Abbott, Frederick Calvin Bass, Ethelene Russell Blair, Hannah Catherine Clem, David Michael Kuykendall, Michael Mode, Kathy Mode, Zachary Milam Mode, Ellen Diane Moloch, Cicero White Peck, Ruth Talitha Peck, George L. Scroggin Sr., Robert Kirk Scroggin, Eric Wayne Thacker, Derek Ryan Watson, Glenda K. Watson, Jessica Ryan Watson, Amy Woods, and Marcus Buddy Woods, Jr. The 4-year-old Hannah Catherine Clem was Pastor Kelly Clem's daughter. Jessica Ryan Watson was 2 years old. Zachary Milam Mode was 3. Amy Woods was 9. Among the survivors was Keith Word, trapped under the collapsed roof with 13 broken ribs. Years later, in a 2019 interview with CBS 42, he described that moment. He said he was fixing to die, that he honestly knew he was fixing to die with the roof on top of him. He remembered praying to the Lord that if that was when he needed to go, that was fine, but he just wanted to know if his wife and 2 kids were there. 13-year-old Marcus Woods survived but lost his father, 38-year-old Buddy Woods, and his 9-year-old sister Amy. 1 week later, Marcus would attend Easter sunrise service in a wheelchair. Pastor Kelly Clem survived physically, but lost her 4-year-old daughter Hannah, while her 2-year-old daughter Sarah also survived. Years after the disaster, speaking in an interview for the United Methodist Church, Reverend Clem described going toward where Hannah was. She found her daughter unconscious and talked to her, patted her, and reassured Hannah that she was there. Deep down, she knew Hannah had died, but she was not ready to accept that yet. People were lying injured on the ground in the aftermath, asking their pastor for answers. Speaking to the Deseret News in an article published March 29, 1994, Clem described people lying on the ground asking why, telling her to explain why. Her response was that they do not know why, that she does not think why is the question right now, that they just have to help each other through it. Despite losing her daughter and 20 members of her congregation, Reverend Clem gave an interview the day after the tornado that would be quoted repeatedly in the years that followed. She told reporters that it had not shattered her faith, that she was holding on to her faith, that it was holding her, and that Easter is coming. While the destruction at Goshen United Methodist Church became the defining tragedy of the outbreak, the tornadoes continued throughout the day. Approximately 12 supercells traversed a narrow corridor, typically less than 2 counties wide, producing parallel tornado tracks. Forward speeds between 45 and 65 miles per hour gave communities little time to react, even when warnings went out. At 1:14 p.m. Eastern Time, an F4 tornado began its path in Floyd County, Georgia, moving toward Rome and eventually reaching F4 intensity near the town of White in Bartow County. Around 1:45 p.m., 2 people died, and between 55 and 60 homes were destroyed in the Rome area alone. A tornado warning went out for Pickens County, Georgia at 3:20 p.m. Eastern. 4 minutes later, at 3:24 p.m., the tornado struck Henderson Mountain. A family reunion was underway there, with 14 family members gathered in 2 adjacent mobile homes. 6 of 7 people in one mobile home died. All 7 people in the adjacent mobile home survived completely uninjured. This concentration of deaths in mobile homes ran as a pattern across the outbreak. 15 of Georgia's 18 fatalities, 83%, occurred in mobile homes. The family at Henderson Mountain had just 4 minutes of warning, and they were unaware of it. Other communities suffered throughout the afternoon. 103 homes sustained damage in Guntersville, Marshall County, Alabama, where 30 people were injured. Grove Oak and Rainsville in DeKalb County lost 16 homes. 1 person died in Ohatchee, Calhoun County, when their van was thrown by the tornado. Mobile home parks in Pelham and Helena, Shelby County, were destroyed. 2 elderly men died near Dahlonega in Lumpkin County, Georgia. Around 4 p.m. Eastern, a tornado descended a 500-foot cliff at Tallulah Falls in Habersham County, Georgia. Debris from the Piedmont tornado, which had struck nearly 140 miles away, turned up later in Tallulah Falls. A bank check from Piedmont, Alabama was discovered at Burton Trout Hatchery in Rabun County, Georgia, approximately 130 miles from where it originated. Debris was traveling across state lines. The final F3, or stronger tornado of the day, struck northwest of Cedartown, Georgia, around 7 p.m. Eastern, and the last tornado of the outbreak touched down in Greenville County, South Carolina, just before midnight. When the outbreak finally ended, after 21 hours and 40 minutes of tornado activity, 29 confirmed tornadoes had occurred. 10 were rated F0, 6 were rated F1, 4 were rated F2, 7 were rated F3, and 2 were rated F4. 42 people were dead, and more than 320 people were injured. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration assessed property damage at $107 million, with some sources citing figures as high as $140 million. Georgia took $67.5 million in damage, North Carolina $27.2 million, Alabama $7.6 million, and South Carolina $4.5 million. Beyond the residential damage, more than 500,000 chickens died, contributing to over $10 million in agricultural losses. 354 residences were destroyed across Alabama and Georgia combined, with another 849 damaged. 3 days after the outbreak, on March 30th, 1994, Vice President Al Gore visited Goshen, Alabama. He toured the remains of the destroyed church with Reverend Kelly Clem. The visit was more than ceremonial. Standing amid the rubble where 20 people had died, Gore made a statement with lasting policy implications, pledging to expand the NOAA weather radio network so that rural communities like Piedmont would no longer be left in coverage gaps. Gore told Reverend Clem that on behalf of the country, he wanted to thank her for this lesson in grace. President Clinton declared 6 Alabama counties major disaster areas on the same day, making federal assistance available to survivors. FEMA and the American Red Cross led the ground response, and the United Methodist Committee on Relief became active in recovery efforts. But the real question emerging from the rubble was not about disaster relief. It was about prevention. How do you reach people inside a church on Sunday morning? How do you warn a family reunion in mobile homes? How do you deliver a 12-minute warning to people who are not listening to any form of broadcast media? One local broadcaster captured the challenge when speaking to NOAA investigators for their disaster survey report. Tom Williams, general manager of WHMA-FM, pointed out that at 11 o'clock in the morning, the churches are full because this is the Bible Belt. He asked how you get the word out to everybody, and he answered that it is impossible because mass communication only works with people who are listening. James Spann, a meteorologist at WBRC-TV in Birmingham, who would go on to become one of the most recognized severe weather broadcasters in the country, made a similar point in the NOAA report. He noted that the WSR-88D radar at Maxwell Air Force Base performed like a champ and effectively detected mesocyclones. But the problem was that many people did not hear the warnings. A lot of the problem, he added, is public apathy. But apathy is not quite the right word for what happened at Goshen United Methodist Church. Those people were not apathetic. They were in church, doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing on Palm Sunday morning. And that is where the real problem became clear, because the warning system of 1994 had no way to reach them there. One broadcaster who was on the air that morning did something unusual, something that had not been done before in that market. Dan Satterfield, a meteorologist at WBRC-TV, activated the emergency broadcast system. The emergency broadcast system was the nationwide alert system designed for nuclear attacks and other national emergencies. By 1994, it could technically be used for severe weather, but it almost never was, and most broadcasters had never activated it for a tornado. Writing in a Facebook post in 2019, 25 years after the outbreak, Satterfield recalled what happened in the control room that morning. Someone told him they were not sure they knew how to do it for real, and he replied that they had to figure it out in the next 3 minutes. They did. When the distinctive tones sounded and Satterfield announced that this was not a test, people took it seriously. But television reaches people who are watching television. It does not reach people who are in church. A tragic irony sits in the timing of the Palm Sunday outbreak. 2 days after the tornadoes, on March 29, 1994, Birmingham received its local WSR-88D Doppler radar. The new radar network was being deployed across the country as part of a massive National Weather Service modernization effort. Had the outbreak occurred just a few days later, Birmingham's forecasters would have had even better detection capabilities for mesocyclone signatures and hook echoes. But detection was not the problem. The radar at Maxwell Air Force Base had tracked the storms effectively, and the warnings went out. From a meteorological standpoint, the system worked. The problem was the last mile, getting the warning from the broadcast to the person who needed it. 1 week after the tornado, on April 3, 1994, approximately 200 people gathered in the parking lot of Goshen United Methodist Church for Easter sunrise service. The church building behind them lay flattened, rubble from what had been their sanctuary still scattered across the property. A wooden cross, made by a friend of the congregation, served as the backdrop for the service. A Catholic church had donated 4 stained glass windows. 13-year-old Marcus Woods attended in a wheelchair. 7 days earlier, he had lost his father, Buddy, and his 9-year-old sister, Amy. Marcus was there with them. Reverend Kelly Clem led the service. Just 7 days after burying her 4-year-old daughter, Hannah, and 19 members of her congregation, she stood before the survivors and spoke about resurrection. The day after the tornado, she had declared that Easter is coming. Now, Easter had arrived. A Roanoke Times article from April 4, 1994, captured the congregation's approach with its headline, "Congregation Stresses Life, Not Losses, After Tornado." The 1994 Palm Sunday outbreak forced a fundamental reassessment of how the United States delivers severe weather warnings. In the late 1970s, NOAA Weather Radio operated approximately 300 transmitters nationwide. Budget cuts had curtailed expansion, and the network primarily served urban areas. Rural communities like Cherokee County, Alabama, simply had no coverage. When Vice President Gore visited Goshen and pledged to expand the network, it was not just political rhetoric. The disaster had made the coverage gap impossible to ignore. 20 people had died in a church that fell within the service area of no NOAA weather radio transmitter. The warning had gone out. The technology to deliver it did not exist in that location. Fort Payne, Alabama received the first new transmitter installed after the outbreak, directly covering the Piedmont and Goshen area. Expansion continued over the following decades. By 2002, the network had grown to 750 transmitters, covering approximately 95% of the United States population. By 2019, 1,032 transmitters covered approximately 98% of the population. This was a clear sign of expansion. That was a jump from 300 stations in the late 1970s to over 1,000 by 2019, from urban-only coverage to near-universal coverage. What happened at Goshen United Methodist Church drove a significant part of that transformation. The NOAA Disaster Survey Report, published in August 1994, made specific recommendations. It called for mandatory state severe weather outlooks whenever the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate or high risk. It emphasized the critical importance of solving the last mile problem in warning delivery, and it encouraged places of public gathering, including churches, to install NOAA weather radio receivers. The outbreak also accelerated the broader National Weather Service modernization effort, a $4.5 billion investment that included the nationwide deployment of WSR-88D Doppler radar. Detection technology was being upgraded, but equally important was the recognition that detection alone was not enough. Cherokee County, Alabama, installed outdoor warning sirens in the area around Piedmont and Goshen after the outbreak. None had existed in 1994. Goshen United Methodist Church rebuilt a short distance from the original location, at 925 Alabama Highway 9 South, and continues active ministry to this day. The original church site at 19,615 Goshen Road became Goshen United Methodist Memorial Park. Name markers for each of the 20 victims stand there now, with dogwood trees rising above each nameplate. The remaining walls and foundation of the original church were preserved, and the congregation considers it holy ground. The survivors of Goshen did not retreat from the world. When the April 27, 2011 tornado outbreak struck Alabama, one of the most devastating tornado events in American history, Goshen survivors became volunteers, helping victims in the Ohatchee area. The same community the 1994 tornado had crossed was struck again that day by an EF4. Barry Owens, who survived the 1994 tornado at Antioch Baptist Church in Grove Oak with his wife Barbara, became a Red Cross volunteer after the disaster. His explanation was simple: they and FEMA were so good to us. Reverend Kelly Clem continued her ministry and worked with the United Methodist Committee on Relief. She has participated in documentary projects sharing the story of what happened at Goshen. The community has marked significant anniversaries of the disaster, though the observances have sometimes been complicated by the very weather they commemorate. Memorial services were held in Piedmont for the 20th anniversary in 2014. A service planned for the 25th anniversary in 2019 had to be canceled because of a severe weather threat on Palm Sunday. The same atmospheric pattern that had caused the 1994 disaster was threatening again, and the service was rescheduled. The warning systems transformed by the 1994 tragedy allowed the community to make that decision, to prioritize safety over commemoration. For the 30th anniversary in 2024, Pastor Kelly Clem gave interviews, and a documentary project called The Palm Sunday Project was produced, featuring survivor stories. Commemorations continued in 2025. Church members noted that the community is still healing. 30 years later, the scars remain. But so does the church. So does the community. And so does the transformed warning system that now reaches 98% of the American population through NOAA weather radio, outdoor sirens, television, and modern wireless emergency alerts that automatically push tornado warnings to smartphones. The 1994 Palm Sunday tornado outbreak killed 42 people and produced 29 tornadoes across the American Southeast. By raw numbers, it was not an extraordinarily large outbreak. It was not a super outbreak. It did not produce 5 tornadoes, and it did not set records for damage or geographic extent. But it exposed something that larger, more dramatic outbreaks had not revealed as clearly: the gap between issuing a warning and reaching the people who need it. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning 12 minutes before Goshen United Methodist Church was destroyed, and that warning was technically excellent. But a warning that is not received is a warning that does not exist. No NOAA weather radio sat in the church. No transmitter covered their area. No outdoor sirens existed nearby, and no one was watching television or listening to radio. They were in church on Palm Sunday morning, doing exactly what millions of Americans were doing that day. The transformation that followed, the expansion of NOAA weather radio from 300 stations to over 1,000, the emphasis on solving the last mile problem, the recognition that detection is only half the challenge, did not come from a catastrophic super outbreak. It came from a community of 150 people gathered in a small church in rural Alabama who never knew that a tornado warning had been issued for them. Reverend Kelly Clem lost her 4-year-old daughter Hannah that morning, along with 19 members of her congregation. She told reporters it had not shattered her faith. She said she was holding on to her faith and that it was holding her. She said Easter is coming. Easter did come, 1 week later. 200 people gathered in the ruins of their church for sunrise service, with a wooden cross standing where the sanctuary had been. And the work of rebuilding, both the church and the warning systems, had begun. Today, if a tornado threatens a church in rural Alabama, the odds are dramatically better that someone inside will know about it. A NOAA weather radio might sound, an outdoor siren might wail, or a wireless emergency alert might buzz on their smartphone. The last mile problem has not been fully solved, but it has been transformed. That transformation is the legacy of Goshen United Methodist Church. Not just the 20 names on the memorial markers, though those names deserve remembrance. Edward, Earl Abbott, Jonathan Andrews Abbott, Frederick Calvin Bass, Ethelene Russell Blair, Hannah Catherine Clem, David Michael Kuykendall, Michael and Kathy Mode, and their 3-year-old son Zachary, Ellen Diane Moloch, Cicero and Ruth Peck, George and Robert Scroggin, Eric Wayne Thacker, Derek and Glenda Watson, and their 2-year-old daughter Jessica, Amy Woods, and her father Buddy. Their legacy is that the next church, the next school, the next family reunion in a mobile home has a better chance of hearing the warning in time. That is what Palm Sunday, 1994, taught America. A warning that does not reach people is a warning that failed. And the 12 minutes that never arrived at Goshen United Methodist Church changed how we think about protecting communities from severe weather. Easter is coming. And thanks in part to what happened that terrible Palm Sunday morning, more people will be alive to see it.